thank you guys all for coming out. We're going to learn a little bit more about Erin Paradis today and her amazing exhibition that is up right now. Paradis is a ceramic sculptor living and working in Minneapolis. She received her MFA from the University of Minnesota and her BFA from Alfred University. She's worked as an artist, resident, business owner, and instructor at art centers and academic settings nationally and internationally, and was a lecturer of ceramics and sculpture from 2015 to 2020 at the University of Minnesota. She's won several grants and fellowships in support of her work, including the 2019 Jerome Ceramic Artist Fellowship and an early project grant through Forecast Public Art. And most recently, she installed a large-scale outdoor piece at Silverwood Park in St. Anthony. Thank you, Erin.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess now I need to pepper you with questions.
Yeah, great.
So we'll start out with the most complicated one. Is there an origin story for this particular body of work that eventually manifested into a way through?
There's not, I can hold it.
You don't want me to creepily be like this?
There's not really necessarily a story, but there's an origin point. As I was brainstorming work for the show, I came into the gallery and met with Allison and Carolyn, and they mentioned being able to hang work from the ceiling, and that kind of got my mind going, thinking about hanging ceramics from the ceiling. And so the origin point was the work that's in that gallery bay. So that kind of started the projection of like the rest of the work. So it kind of spilled out of that.
So I guess that we don't need that. So then that brings us to the next question as far as, would you categorize this exhibition as narrative work or more in the realm of abstraction?
I think that's a good question because it got me thinking about how, to me, it feels like there's a narrative to it, but I think it's very much a personal narrative. I don't think that I don't present it so that it's obvious to viewers. So sometimes it's hard for me to step back and realize like, oh, there isn't a narrative like that's like straightforward for people. So the way that it comes out is through abstraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I feel like the most organic way to go to the next question is through abstraction, because your color palette is definitely, like, I feel like that is something that I've seen over the years with your work that carries through.
Yeah. I guess I think it comes from so a lot of my inspiration like that started a lot of these like larger sculptures, and I started this like trajectory of larger installation work came from my travels abroad and around the country. And so I think a lot of the colors, I guess right now I'm just thinking about a trip to Scotland and a trip to Italy that I took, and there's a lot of there's some spaces or some towns in those countries that have really brightly colored homes and buildings, and they're right next to each other, contrasted with some other kind of color, or like some other like green landscape right next to these different colored buildings. So I think that's just like always in the back of my head is that that color contrast and the colors of these spaces. And so I think I just gravitated towards specific ones and then have just kind of developed it over time.
No, and I think that's really interesting to me because I do feel like you are using colors as a sense of location to sort of establish environment of place, even though it is completely one of your own construction. And that brings us, we're still delving into the idea of like, is abstraction abstraction narrative
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
sense. And one of them is with the repeated shapes. Do they point to something in particular, or is it more of an open-ended analysis of pure form?
I think I'm just gonna look at my notes, because I was thinking about this, and on some level, it points to the way our minds will see familiar objects or spaces that carry emotional gratification. So I think we unknowingly kind of look towards or give significance to objects and in certain spaces that we are attracted to. That's connected to some like distant experience or encounter that we've had to kind of get ourselves acquainted with a space. So I think like I think about that, but I'm not necessarily like specifically like I'm like, okay, this shape that I'm repeating is gonna mean this thing, but it's connected to the idea that like that, or at least I personally will be gravitated towards spaces with archways or that kind of block a certain composition in a space a certain way. So I might be like looking for those shapes and those forms over and over again.
I feel like, and now I'm going to mix it up a little bit, because I do think that's interesting, and I almost feel like we were talking about shapes as sort of an entryway to memory. And so with that in mind, what is a childhood moment that you can remember that you felt maybe a sense of awe in architecture?
That's a good question. I don't know, I guess I was just reading through my thesis paper from grad school this morning just to like...
Why are you doing that to yourself?
Well, I guess I actually really liked the thesis paper and what I like was thinking about and talking about, and I don't know if like now that I'm just like in my studio practice, I'm not like consciously thinking about that stuff like all the time. Anyway, so in my childhood, I guess it wasn't like into architecture that was awe-inspiring, but more so like spaces that felt like familiar or something that I could feel comfort in. So I think I lived in upstate New York and in Binghamton, New York, and it's kind of just like a small city, like suburb. And so my parents were separated, and so I just remember like going back and forth between their houses. The car ride to and from there would be like specific like points in the trip that like I would be like, okay, we're this close to home, like we're passing this marker in this city or whatever. So I think I remember those trips and those like moments of just like remembering like where I was coming from and where I was going to.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely can see that. I mean, it does feel like a lot of the shapes that I'm seeing in the work almost reference travel, like a geographic location.
Yeah.
Your kind of personal map
Right.
from one point to the other.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's great. So this is always the $1 million question. Of all the mediums you could have chosen, why ceramics?
I think it's I'm the most comfortable with ceramics. I started out as a potter for like 10 years. And in undergrad, in undergrad I painted and I did ceramics. And I just like I felt more connected to ceramics, so I continued on with that. And then when I went to grad school, I wanted to make I wanted to delve into sculpture. So I don't know, just ceramics felt the most comfortable. And I do dabble with other mediums. I've welded and I've built wood forms, and I guess my comfort level in those materials isn't as strong as ceramics. But I to go into the medium a little bit more, I like the possibilities with the material. I feel like there's so many. It's more organic and more malleable than a lot of materials, and I don't know, the process is like, as much as it is like a long process of creating it and firing it and glazing it and firing it again. It's always like an exciting like revelation when you open up the kiln and see what you've made.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the next question was about the conceptual aspect of fragility, which may or may not be the case. But I do think it's because it has that malleability at first, but then it becomes like such a risk.
Yeah, I guess I think with my own work, I don't see it as fragile. It's hard, I think, because I'm like used to it. I think other ceramics, I might feel like it's more fragile, but I do like the weight of it, the weight that it holds, like physically, but like visually too. Like the piece in that, the hanging pieces there, like we all know that ceramics is heavy, and so that weighted feeling next to the like quick cut pieces of canvas on the wall and the shadow, like having that like light and weight and heavy kind of visual feeling next to each other I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Have you ever imagined the aspect of any of this work containing a kinetic element or a sonic element?
You know, I don't think I had until we hung this piece, and it's not moving now, but when we're installing it, and the way that we're holding it up while we're installing it, it was like holding it still, and then we released it, and they kind of moved and shifted. They all kind of just like shifted just a touch, and like that aspect was really cool. Just like a tiny little shift. So that kind of got me thinking a little bit more. Yeah.
No, and because there is, especially with the piece in there, and I think it's also because of the defying expectations. Like just what you said, the weight of the material seems so immense, yet it's kind of floating in that space.
Yeah.
And Erin told me we couldn't do a puppet show today instead of a talk show. So I have some plans for that one.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So this is always, it's an interesting question, I think, for all artists, because I'm asking maybe the artist that is the most inspiring to you, but I want you to be able to draw from like whatever you get the most inspiration
Sure.
from.
I mean, artists always pop up in my head about who I'm inspired by. Louis Barragan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing all of their names right. He's an architect, Mexican architect. Philida Barlow, Linda Lopez, and Neri Bagaronian.
I'm sorry I made you say those names.
No, I don't know if you guys know who I'm referencing, but that, especially Philida Barlow, her work is just like, it like fills the space, and when you have to like navigate through the work, like even more so than like walking around my pieces over there. And that, I was able to go into an exhibition of hers in Scotland. She had one while I was there, and it was just, I went back twice because I was just like floored by the experience. And just her use of materials was really inspiring. I knew that they were like construction materials, but it just like felt like I was in another world. And I wasn't like concentrated on what the materials were. It was just like this awesome experiential experience in this space. And then, I mean, I think like many, traveling is just really exciting.
Well, what specifically about travel?
I guess that it puts me in a new environment where like I feel like when we kind of ground ourselves in a home and are in a city, we are, you know, we're familiar with all the like stores and all the buildings and all the, you know, we're used to everything that we pass, and we're used to, you know, the same kind of routes that we take. We maybe don't pay attention to everything and all the little nuances. And I think putting myself into a different situation kind of opens me up to, it opens, I think maybe almost everybody up to it, but I just feel like, I don't know, it just gets me like excited and like out of my head and like, and just like thinking about the vastness of the world and like, yeah.
Well, and I feel like this is a perfect time to ask the question about scale. Let's say if I had a blank check right now to give you, and you could build a truly immersive environment, is this something that would interest you, and what would it look like?
I think as I have built larger and larger things, I think the possibilities feel more and more possible. Like after my piece at Silverwood, I was just like, oh, okay, I can make this happen. Like I can find the people to help me to like make this work, and I can figure out what technically needs to be done so that I can put this thing up in the air or something. So yeah, I think that would be really awesome. I think I don't know, I don't have anything specific, but I think something outdoors would be really great. I think that piece at Silverwood was really like, I like that its connection to nature and water, and how that kind of and the changing of seasons with the piece, how that will affects your perspective on the piece. But then I like installing this piece in this bay was really exciting, and so I think, I don't know, finding a space that I could just completely transform, would be cool.
No, and that kind of leads into the next question pretty nicely, the question about texture, because that's obviously very important to you.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's, well, and I mean, I feel that ceramics could be like a touchable work, but just even imagining larger spaces, what are some of the tactile responses that you would like people to have?
I mean, I think that would definitely bring in other materials, because I think that, I don't know, they definitely, like having, although, I mean, this is like a pedestal, this piece here, but it's like also still it's a sculpture kind of, with all of these other smaller objects. So like a person's sense of like wood grain and feeling that next to something that, like this surface here is smooth. So I think bringing in other materials would help kind of bring out some aspects of my work and the textures that I kind of create with the surfaces that I make.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that brings us to an interesting question. Like, how kind of do you just consider these means of display? Because I think that I found it really refreshing and interesting that you created your own pieces to put your ceramics in.
So what was the question again?
I'm sorry, and I was like, I'm not even sure if there was a question there. But why did you, like, why was it your artistic choice to actually build your own pieces?
Sure. I guess I don't feel like the traditional pedestal fits with my work. I think that I think pedestals are so that we can like, it's kind of supposed to be like the white wall for 3D work, right? So that we can like just view the object. But my work is so much about the objects in relationship to each other and the space that they're in. So I feel like that it's kind of forced me to think about like what are they going to sit on and how are they going to be raised up and how are my objects going to be seen on the whatever they're going to be sitting on. Mm-hmm. And how does the weight of that thing, how does that feel next to my objects?
Oh, now I have a goofy question.
Sure.
But I like this one, so I saved it. Thanks, Zeke. Does working with fire make you feel more like a blacksmith or a baker?
Oh, it's like one or the other?
Yeah, like apparently you can't be both.
Probably a baker, for sure. I mean, I make sourdough, so I feel like there's a connection there. But I guess a baker, because I feel like it's similarly like I'm putting something in the oven and then like I'm gonna open up the oven and see like it's something's gonna be different and something's gonna be changed and
Well, and so this is like a strange process question, but how like once you get to the point where you're starting to firework, like how much can you change it after that?
You mean like the actual shape and form, or just?
I think I know the answer to that one, but yeah, maybe. Or also like the color shifts or texture.
No, I guess that's a good question. I guess these pieces over here, these two green pieces, they're built in 3 sections. So I mean, they would look really different if it was 6 sections just sitting up. So I think, the way that they're placed together or their context next to each other, like these 3 pieces hanging there, a single piece by itself. So visually for that piece, like it changes how it looks. Mm-hmm. But I think, the glaze totally shifts how a piece looks for me, at least. That I think this piece, I'm highlighting the curve of it, of the form, and so I think without that, it would feel a lot different. It wouldn't. I wouldn't like be so prominent.
So do you enjoy the uncertainty sometimes? The like opening the kiln and maybe it not being what you expected? And I don't mean like exploded, I mean like a different color.
To a point, I do know what's going to happen.
Because you've been doing it for a long time.
Because I have test tiles upon test tiles upon test tiles. There is always excitement. Because, even though I have a test tile with a certain color on it, the way that it plays out on a specific form is going to be different. The way that I pinched a piece of clay and the way that the glaze sits on that surface is going to be different from piece to piece. So it's always exciting.
No, maybe that is also an element of your process is literally repetition, that you just keep trying the same thing over and over again with slight variation.
Yeah.
So I guess this brings us to the last question, and then we'll open it up to the audience for everyone to ask their questions. And that is, what is next for you? And it doesn't have to be where you're showing. It could just be like something that you're going to make next.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've been making some functional work that I'm hand building right now. It's always nice after making something really large and working on a show to kind of just come down to like a smaller scale and just so I'm making some functional works, but I've been doing some more painting that's similar to the drawings on these tiles. So nothing grand yet, but I have ideas brewing. So
No, and it's always, you've done a lot of work for this show, so you deserve to maybe take it down.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna open it up to the audience.
Did you both work on it?
Well, you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
How did you figure out what size eye screws to use and all that sort of stuff?
Well, I know how much each piece weighs, and so I just looked for the right hardware that is rated for that weight. But honestly, like they're rated for like 1,000 pounds more than I needed.
They look so minimal for the massiveness of the white curves, and it's really elegant. So was there like a scaffold to hold it up while you
I hadn't used scaffolding like that before, and that was like super nice. It was like, it made it really like pretty seamless.
They're also just, they're level at the bottom. It's not like, oh, this one.
I think we looked up.
It really, it's just so pleasing.
Thanks. Yeah, I think with Allison's help, she's installed a lot of like hanging things. But we had the scaffolding at the same height for each piece, and we had each piece on the same foam. So I just that helped as we were like attaching the cable.
She swaged the suckers.
Well, yes. Yeah.
Cricket tool.
Really hard.
Yes.
I'm attracted to your larger pieces. And I don't know if that's because I'm so worried about them, they'll drop. After all the work you put into them and their uniqueness, I don't know how you live with it.
Like these pieces?
Those behind you as well, because they look so hefty. They look heavy, and I thought, no, it must be hollow inside because you have to, in the kill, they have to have an open space.
Right. Yeah.
And so, is that true? Are they hollow inside? Are they lighter than they look?
It's hard for me to step back from my work, because I've lived with it for so long. But they're hollow inside, yes.
Good.
Yeah, and some of them have some interior walls that help support, so there's like a kind of architectural system inside to support it. So like those curves have some walls running through it, which make it a little bit heavier. And those pieces I definitely needed like 2 people to move them. But these aren't that heavy.
Well, even moving them in a situation like putting them up there seems to me like you gotta be really careful.
These are a lot lighter than you would think.
I hope so.
I think this is probably like 15 pounds.
Okay, that's doable, I guess.
They're actually deceptively light, to the point where I was preparing a heavy lift and it was not really.
Well, the colors aren't heavy. The pastels kind of counteract that bulk. And on the other hand, if you were to make them black and brown and call up earthly kinds of make them feel heavier, I think, too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope they're never found. Thanks.
Me too.
Does anyone else have any questions? Well, I feel like we're good. We can have casual conversation, which I know is always a little bit better than like questions. So thank you so much, Erin. It's been a pleasure to have this up, a pleasure to see you work. So
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. And thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.